From brutal offshore drilling platforms, all the way to the homeowner and hobbyist, Lincoln Electric's 125 years of experience provides the quality you need. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by Lincoln Electric. Whether your project vehicle is brand new or 50 years old, Napa will have the parts and tools you need to get the job done. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by Napa Auto Parts. No hesitation. In previous episodes of the Newfoundland Hobbyist, we bought a 1976 GMC motorhome. Riddled with mechanical issues, we proceeded with maintenance, getting it to run well enough for our inspection. After our inspection, we tore off the camper house. We've spent a whole bunch of time getting the vehicle running just right, and now today we're going to proceed with some body work. You can watch all of these projects in much more detail over on my YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube and search up Kyle Noseworthy. Well, it was supposed to rain a little bit today, but not a whole lot. Definitely raining harder than it was called for. So we might have to take a rain check. Removing that camper house has left us with a very small amount of cab on our truck. Our truck to be, that is. Today, we're very thankful for this donor vehicle as we'll start harvesting parts. Now first off, we got a flawless headliner, a perfect white headliner here. So I want that one for the cab of mine. That'll just hide all the work we did up there. Oh, come on. What is that? Go. It's raining pretty good out there, but I'll still get suited up regardless. The tools can handle it. May not get anything done today. Not with it pouring like that. Sunroof engaged. Now that the weather's dried up, we're testing our rough cut roof panel for the first time. So we're just throwing it on there and we're going to size up the situation. It's oversized, it needs to be trimmed, it's very rough, but we're going to see how it fits. At this stage, the roof panel is cut to size but still very flimsy. We'll have to stiffen it up before we go any further.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Today we're going to get to work on installing our fully prepared roof panel. You can see with that angle iron, the reinforcement we put in there, the roof is a lot more rigid now. Look at it holding nice and straight instead of crimping and bending. And we're off. The dreaded part of this process, something that has intimidated me just thinking about it all along. We're spot welding this roof in place. So I clamped it, and you notice that I'm just tacking here. This metal, only 16 gauge, it's so light, we can only just run a series of tacks as you see here. Space them out nice and wide, then we'll clean them up and run back over them again, filling in the spaces. Despite how worried I was about this part of the project, the actual welding of the sheet metal, it went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to, and the results will speak for themselves. This was the most uncomfortable part of the welding procedure, just because there was no good way to reach in over and get that panel. It was just an awkward, difficult position. I couldn't lean on my windshield, I couldn't reach from either side, so it was just a bit of a stretch. Because I'm working outside in the elements, I have to do this in parts. So I had to weld and body fill whole sections, including giving it a coat with a little bit of paint, before I moved on to welding another 12 inches, say. We did run into one hiccup with fitting the roof properly. The front passenger corner of our roof panel developed a bubble, and we had to cut that and weld it down in sections to get it to fit. You can see those cuts right here that will allow the panel to overlap itself. Now that I've made those cuts in the bulged part of the roof, I can start overlapping those panels, bringing them down to where they need to be, to where the edges are contacting the original roof, and tacking them in place. And this went surprisingly well. Where I cut the slits in the roof and the roof overlapped a little, we were left with quite a crown there. When I pounded that out, we were left with a hole.
$250.
Two and a half inch wire framing nails happen to be great because they're such a low carbon content steel. They're not brittle. You can tack them and weld them like this and they don't break and chip and pluck off. They're a very soft, malleable metal. In retrospect now, after coming up with this little tool creation here, a little dent puller, my slide hammer, I would have done a hook on the end, kind of like a hammer claw, instead of the C-clamp, which was a little bit difficult to attach to the nails. Worked really great, but it was just a little bit challenging to get them on.
Like magic.
And our results. We moved that overlapping bulge up in right in the corner of the roof there. I've knocked down the real high spots. I've pulled up the low spots, rough ground it with a flat wheel. We have a pretty good setup. Now we're going to go ahead, just like we have been all along, and body fill it right away. We've got to get that covered in before our welds end up getting any moisture on them. And our rough body fill applied. Depending on how much hardener you have added, this sets up really quick. I've put the body fill right down to the gullies, to the eaves trough sort of there, and I'm just really happy with how it's turning out. Using my random orbital sander here now, some real coarse 40 grit pads just to eat down the tall highs and the roughness. I could have done a little smoother job applying it, but I just made sure I had plenty on there. And here's what we have right now. You can see we're to the metal in some spots. We have some high spots filled in. Just really nice. I'm really happy with the work that we got done here today. Have a look at this roof. How exciting is that? I'm just really proud looking at that in the driveway. We officially have our seats out of the rain. Whether I'm in the workshop or out on the trails, Wild Medkits provides me with the equipment I need to stay prepared. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by wildmedkits.ca. As a custom knife maker and craftsman, sharpening has become a part of my daily routine. I use paulsfinest.com for all of my sharpening equipment. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by Paul's Finest.
Fairly good.
And now it's time to check in with our steel stockpile that has been quickly dwindling. We're going to be taking on some fab work today, which is really exciting. I really enjoy this type of work, the cutting, the grinding, and building something completely from scratch.
Freedom with this beauty right here.
What I'm doing here now is starting to fab a roll cage for the back of the cab. Because this was a motorhome with a camper house on the back, of course, once I remove that, there's no back in the cab of this vehicle, so we have to build that. The first step is a steel roll cage, so that's what I'm fabbing up. What I was cutting then was some little pie pieces, some little triangles out of the steel, so I created a gap so I could fold my angle iron inwards like this, and you can see the fit we'll get in just a minute. Now before I went ahead and welded those pie cuts, as you can see right there in the dead middle of the screen, I went ahead and tacked to the bottom cross member first. And that allows me to get everything fixed in place. I want to be able to adjust those pie cuts for as long as possible before I fix everything in place. That'll allow me to make last minute adjustments and have the tightest fit possible. I've really been enjoying this Lincoln MIG pack here, this multi-purpose welder. I haven't done a lot yet besides MIG and flux core wire welding, but I'm hoping to dive into some aluminum welding and some TIG welding and start learning those skills as I can purchase the equipment. this frame we've just built should provide a great backing support for our rear roof panel, which is one of the next steps in this process. To close that in, and you can see we've even framed for a window there that we've robbed from an old bus store. Once again, that donor van is increasing in value by giving us this driver's side front fender. I originally knew I had a little bit of softness in the front quarter panel of our GMC 3500, but the damage was more extensive than I thought, the rust in there. And while I thought I could just swap out the whole fender, I realized after that these old vehicles had structural quarter panels. They aren't removable. They are spot welded entirely to the vehicle. So given that information, welding in a patch panel is about our best option in this scenario. Hi, Addie. Simmons Tire supplies all the wheels, tires, and accessories you need for everything from ATVs and cars to heavy equipment and machinery. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by Simmons Tire. For the beginner and advanced sharpener, the Edge Pro sharpening system makes it easier for you to get razor sharp edges every time. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored by Edge Pro Inc. Now, we're going to start closing in the back of the cab. I went up to our donor vehicle and harvested a large side of sheet metal out of the vehicle. I then processed that into one clean, nice, narrow strip. Because while I've purchased a 4x8 sheet of steel for the back of the cab is a little more than 4 feet tall. So one sheet won't do it. So we had to do exactly what you're seeing here and join on a strip to the entire length of our panel before we actually did any shaping. Dad held our rear panel in place against the back of the truck cab here while I traced around with a permanent marker. So when we laid the sheet back down, we had a full exact perimeter tracing.
that. Wow. Woohoo! Man,
This is very tedious work, welding on frail old steel like this, and body panels to begin with are such thin metal. I'm thankful that my Lincoln electric welder can turn down to such a low voltage to be able to weld this metal. Check out those seams, those corner edges. They have been ground in, smooth with a flat wheel, and then smooth even more with a roll lock attachment or a Scotch-Brite on a die grinder. And you can see we just have a beautiful finish. I think we're about ready to prep for paint. Now, unlike steelwork and welding, body filling and sanding and priming is not something that you can do out in the elements. So, luckily, Dad had a shop space available that we were able to get the truck in and start this work. We're about out of time for today, so we're going to end it about here, but I appreciate you watching so much. You audience are really awesome. I love getting your comments. I love getting your feedback and messages. It's really all so special to me, and I really hope you're thoroughly enjoying this series. I also want to give a huge shout out to my sponsors who really help contribute to this show and make it possible. Without their support, this show would not be happening. So if you can go and support them in any way, if any of those brands or companies have items that are valuable to you, please choose them. Please support them, and thanks for supporting our show. There is so much more exciting work to come on this build, and you are not going to want to miss it. So as always, make sure you tune in next week to the Newfoundland Hobbyist.